Good evening, everyone. It is February 28th at 7 p.m., and I'm calling to order the regular City Council meeting for the City of Richfield. First of all, if you're able, please stand and join us for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Next, we have the open forum. If you want to call into the open forum, you can dial 1-415-655-0001. Use the webinar access code 2451-353-6303 and the password 1234. Management Analyst Swanson, is there anyone online currently that is called in?
Mayor and Council, I do not see anyone on the line.
Is there anyone in the audience that wishes to speak at open forum? All right, so it does not appear that we have any speakers for open forum, so we're going to move on to the next item on our agenda, which is approval of the minutes of the City Council work session of February 14th, 2023, the City Council regular meeting of February 14th, 2023, and the City Council and Director Retreat of February 15th, 2023.
So moved.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded. Is there any discussion or are there any corrections? All in favor of approving the three sets of minutes, please say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? And we've approved the minutes. Next, we'll move on to approval of the agenda.
I move approval.
Second.
Okay, it's been moved and seconded to approve the agenda. Are there any comments? Hearing none, all in favor of approving the agenda, please say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? We've approved the agenda. Thank you. Next, we'll move on to the consent calendar. City Manager Rodriguez.
Thank you, Mayor. The consent calendar contains several separate items which are acted upon by the City Council in one motion. Once the consent calendar has been approved, the individual items and recommended actions have also been approved. No further council action on these items is necessary. On tonight's consent calendar, there's just one item. Item A, consider the adoption of a resolution supporting the repeal of the exclusion of Hennepin and Ramsey counties from receiving motor vehicle lease sales tax funds. And I submit that one item for your consideration as part of the consent calendar.
I would make a motion to approve the consent calendar.
Second.
Okay, it's been moved and seconded to approve the consent calendar. Is there any discussion? Hearing none, all in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? All right, we've approved the consent calendar. Next, we're going to move on to our public hearing, and I'm going to turn it over to Councilmember Hayford O'Leary. Thank you.
Thank you. This is a public hearing in consideration of a resolution specifying the use of funds from the Urban Hennepin County Community Development Block Grant allocation for 2023 and authorizing execution of a subrecipient agreement with Hennepin County and any required third-party agreements. Community Development Block Grant, CDBG funding is annually awarded to Hennepin County on a formula basis from the Department of Housing and Urban Development. The county, in turn, allocates a portion of these funds to the City of Richfield to address local needs related to affordable housing, community development, and public services. Staff is proposing to use the city's 2023 direct allocation of an estimated $169,112 to fund the Housing and Redevelopment Authority's Deferred Loan Rehabilitation Program and the First-Time Homebuyer Program. $119,112 is proposed to be allocated to the Deferred Loan Program, which provides a critical source of funds for people with limited incomes to rehabilitate their homes. The Deferred Loan Program is administered by Hennepin County on behalf of the city. $50,000 is proposed to be allocated to the HRA for the First-Time Homebuyer Down Payment Assistance Program, administered by city staff. This program is aimed at low and moderate income first-time homebuyers who are looking to buy homes in Richfield. In addition to CDBG funds, the program is also funded through the city's Affordable Housing Trust Fund. Does staff have anything to add prior to the public hearing?
No, we're available for questions.
Okay, so if anybody would like to speak on this item, the podium is available to you, or you can call in at this time. if anybody is watching and wants to call in, we can always reopen the public hearing should we receive a call, but I don't expect it. So I will move to close the public hearing.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded to close the public hearing. All in favor of closing the public hearing, please say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Okay, the public hearing is closed.
And I will move that we adopt a resolution authorizing the use of funds for the 2023 Urban Hennepin County Community Development Block Grant Program and authorizing execution of a subrecipient agreement with Hennepin County and any required third-party agreements.
Second?
Okay, it's been moved and seconded. Is there any discussion? All right, Councilmember Troutman.
Thank you, Mayor. I just wanted to say a word of appreciation for something that people might not think a lot about. It kind of rolls off the tongue, CDBG money. We kind of throw that around the county, but they're really transformative. I know it was transformative for my family in 2008 when our family was really struggling financially. We had the opportunity to purchase a home. We were able to use CDBG money, and without that, we would not have been able to. And it was really transformative in our family's life. And well, there are a lot of ways to use the funds, but it's a powerful tool that provides affordable housing in contexts that we don't always think about affordable housing. So I just wanted to say a word of support for that.
All right, any other comments? Councilmember Whalen?
I would echo all of that and also realized not being on the HRA, I hadn't heard an update for a while. Do we still have, I don't know if we officially have a waiting list, but do we have more demand for these than we're able to fill each year? Or are we, I know particularly the first-time homebuyer program is not that old. Are we starting to see any decline? I certainly anecdotally know there's a strong need for that in the community.
Councilmember Whalen, Mayor, members of the council, we do have a long waiting list for the deferred loan program, and that has been the case for several years. So we always want to put funding in there. There is additional funding that comes through repayments, and so it is a little bit more money than what's allocated each year. As for the down payment program, it has remained strong in spite of high interest rates. We're not quite sure how people are making it work, but we have still received some applications. It is a challenge right now for folks to make that work, but the HRA has made some adjustments to the program so that we can still have, I think we had, was it 8 or 10 loans last year? So a good number. We were able to supplement it with the Affordable Housing Trust Fund with some other sales proceeds. And so that's why we've been able to do more loans.
Awesome. Thank you.
Other comments? I would also like to add my appreciation for both of those programs. I think both the deferred loan program and the first-time home buyer down payment assistance program are valuable to our community, and I'm glad that we're able to continue them and find ways to fund them. So thank you. All right. It's been moved and seconded to adopt the resolution. Is there any further discussion? All right. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? All right. We've adopted the resolution. Thank you. Next, we're going to move on to an item that has 3 parts. We'll have the staff report after Councilmember Troutman introduces it, and then there'll be 3 separate votes. So I'm going to turn it over to Councilmember Troutman.
Thank you, Mayor, and thank you to everybody who's here tonight and is going to have an opportunity to speak. Tonight we're considering the adoption of resolutions in support of funding applications to the MnDOT Corridors of Commerce program for the following projects. 1, for the City of Richfield's application for a proposed project on Trunk Highway 62 between Portland Avenue and Trunk Highway 77, including reconfiguration of the Trunk Highway 62, Trunk Highway 77 interchange. Number 2 is the City of Bloomington's application for a proposed project at 82nd Street and 35W interchange and the reconstruction of the railroad bridge over I-494 at Pleasant Avenue. And 3, the I-494 Corridor Commission's application for a proposed project to add Easy Pass lanes on I-94, on I-494 from I-35W to Trunk Highway 77, and the reconstruction of the railroad bridge over I-494 at Pleasant Avenue. And just by way of a little bit of a summary, these projects have been presented to the City Council by staff, by Bloomington staff, and by the 494 Corridor Commission staff, respectively. The recently developed Regional Transportation Investment Framework tool has been completed for the 3 projects and are included in this packet. For the first project, the City of Richfield, Trunk Highway 62, this project will provide an expected benefit to Richfield residents via a reconstructed pedestrian bridge over Trunk Highway 62, noise wall along the highway, and a combination of the auxiliary lane and interchange reconfiguration, minimizing regional traffic diversion onto Portland Avenue and 66th Street. Increasing safety for pedestrians, cyclists, and drivers, and Richfield staff recommended approving a resolution of support for this application. For folks that are commuters from the city of Minneapolis into Richfield, I'd also mention that if you've ever gone through 35W and the Crosstown Exchange and you're like, why is it this way? It will be better. Additionally, the city of Bloomington at 82nd Street and Railroad Bridge, this project will benefit a key regional partner and neighbor in their goals for their local transportation system, as well as advance a portion of the I-494 vision that was approved by the I-494 Policy Advisory Committee with participation from Richfield. Richfield staff recommend approving the resolution of support for this application. And finally, the 494 Corridor Commission, 494 Easy Pass lanes, and a railroad bridge. This project will provide a benefit to Richfield as I-494 is a key route into and out of the city, and the vast majority of workers who live in Richfield work outside the city, while the vast majority of people who work in Richfield live outside the city. This project advocates a portion of the I-494 vision that was approved by the I-494 Policy Advisory Committee, or PAC, with participation from Richfield, and shifting east-west traffic off the parallel local systems and back, and for those that are listening, the parallel local systems would be 77th Street on the Richfield side, back onto I-494. Will also reduce traffic on local roads, creating safer conditions for the local road network within Richfield. Richfield staff also recommend approving this a resolution in support of this application. So with that, I think we have several reports, and I believe we're starting with our own Joe Powers. Is that correct?
Thank you, Councilmember Troutman. I'm happy to be here, Mayor, council members, to present to you again on this project. I'll try to be fairly brief because I know you've heard a lot of details on this already, but some context for the public that's here and listening in. Again, my name is Joe Powers. I'm the city engineer here for Richfield in our Public Works Department. So we're going to move right into it. A quick overview of the Corridors of Commerce program. And so this applies to all 3 presentations and projects that you will hear tonight. All 3 of these projects are being submitted to MnDOT for consideration for funding in their Corridors of Commerce program. What this means is that all 3 of these projects are essentially just concepts at this point. We are submitting to MnDOT for consideration under very preliminary design of all these projects and hoping to receive funding to further develop, plan, and ultimately construct these projects. A couple of notes about this year's submittal process for Corridors of Commerce. There are 44 different projects across the state that are being evaluated by MnDOT. They have a total of $250 million in funding that can be divided across all of the projects that are accepted. And we're coming to you tonight because the letters and resolutions of support for projects are due tomorrow to MnDOT. So we're coming in right at the last minute. Of course, we've been working with staff and the council over the last about 6 or 7 weeks on this. So we've had a lot of work that's gone into this. On the right-hand side there of your slide, you'll see the scoring criteria that MnDOT uses for these projects. And the one that's relative to this conversation is the second to last, which is community consensus. A large part of the scoring for each of these projects is based on communities in and around each specific project submitting resolutions of support for these funding applications. So the three you'll hear tonight, the first one that I'm presenting is a project on the north side of Richfield presented to MnDOT by our Richfield staff. The second project is a project on 35W and 494 that's being submitted by Bloomington staff. Bloomington staff are here to present on that project. And the third one is a project on 494 presented by the 494 Corridor Commission. They are also here tonight to present to you. Very quick overview, and I realize this is small. I've got a couple zoomed in views of a couple places on this project following. What we are proposing on Highway 62 is an auxiliary lane, so it's an additional lane for traffic between Portland Avenue and Highway 77 in the eastbound direction. The intent of this auxiliary lane is to provide a little bit more capacity for this stretch of highway that is currently congested during peak hours, take that traffic that would like to stay on the highway in that segment and keep it off of our local streets in Richfield, thereby improving safety and congestion within our local roadways for drivers, pedestrians, cyclists, etc. The next element of this project would be along the corridor is installing noise walls that would benefit both Richfield and Minneapolis residents who live directly adjacent to the stretch of Highway 62. The third portion of this project is replacing an outdated pedestrian bridge at 14th Avenue across Highway 62. Currently, that bridge is not ADA compliant or Americans with Disabilities Act compliant. And so it's just stairs, there's no ramps. Anyone in a wheelchair, bicycle with any mobility issues can't use that bridge. We'd really like to improve that connection into Minneapolis. And so we're currently proposing relocating it to 12th Avenue. 12th Avenue is currently a bike boulevard in Minneapolis. And so we think we could have a nice connection with our neighboring city by relocating it. I will remind you that this is preliminary, so there are options for the location of that bridge and the design. And then the last portion of the project that we've submitted is a modification to the interchange at Highway 62 and Highway 77. We're proposing removing the northeast loop, which serves traffic coming from westbound Highway 62 onto southbound Highway 77. What this does is eliminates a very short distance merging movement for highway traffic, which is both a safety concern and creates congestion on westbound Highway 62 that then backs up typically onto northbound Highway 77. So we're looking to solve the congestion in that area and really improve the safety operations for drivers there. So to replace that loop, we'd be installing an intersection, and preliminarily we're showing it as a signalized intersection. It could be a roundabout or some other type of intersection control. That's an element that would be investigated in project planning if this project were funded and were to move forward in any capacity. So I do have a quick zoomed in view of the pedestrian bridge. I would like to note in transparency that at this time we are preliminarily seeing 3 private property impacts, and we have not done the analysis to determine if it would be a full take of those properties or a partial take and what that ultimate impact would be. But we have noted them here. The first one you see is just south of the proposed bridge on 12th Avenue. And then the other 2 are right in that small triangle group of parcels at 14th and 62nd Street. I will note that all of these properties are in Minneapolis, not Richfield, but they're on the Richfield side of the highway. And then second, just a more detailed view of the interchange configuration at Highway 62 and Highway 77. So in summary, some of the benefits that we see from this project, we see this as a low-cost, high-benefit project. As I said, there's $250 million available. We're estimating this project around $19 to $20 million for these improvements. So it's a relatively small portion of the funding available with a relatively high benefit both on the highway system and locally. We are anticipating to keep regional traffic off of on Highway 62 and off of the local system. So just to note that a couple of the intersections where traffic diverts currently are some of our highest crash density intersections in Richfield. So hoping to make some safety improvements by lowering the volumes and speeds of traffic going through those intersections. I think everyone can recognize that people driving locally for local business are more likely to drive slower and more aware than those cutting through our local system if they're trying to get away from congestion. We're looking to replace an aging non-ADA compliant pedestrian bridge, so improving connections with us and our neighbor in Minneapolis, and then adding noise walls, which is a benefit to all of the residential properties along Highway 62. There are some trade-offs. We want to be open and acknowledge those. As I noted, there is potential for property impacts and acquisitions for this project. Part of the process, if this was awarded in planning, would be doing a really detailed investigation into those impacts and how we can minimize or eliminate those. And then there are some impacts that at this point in the process, we haven't been able to fully investigate. And again, those would be part of the planning process. So things like the full impacts to traffic, local air quality impacts, greenhouse gas emissions, and the full benefits of noise walls. Those analyses have not yet been done. And they wouldn't typically be until you move into a actual planning phase of a project once it's received some preliminary funding. So lastly, our staff recommendation to council is, and request is to provide a resolution of support for this funding application so that we may complete our submittal to MnDOT tomorrow. That is my presentation. I'm going to, I guess it's up to Mayor Supple and the council. Would you like to have any discussion or questions now, or do you like me to pass it along to Bloomington staff for their presentation?
Councilmember Troutman, did you want to take questions now, or?
I think that would be great. Also, I just want to thank you for the thorough report, and also I just want to take note of the trade-offs that you shared with us too. So I know the staff has taken a position. I'm inclined to support it, but I appreciate your thoroughness in giving us all the relevant facts. So, Mayor, do we have any comments?
Go ahead, Ben, or Councilmember Whalen.
Thank you, Mayor. I am open to others' thoughts. I guess to me it would feel more logical to do the presentation, discussion, and vote on one project at a time rather than doing all the presentations, then all the questions, calling different people back up. And so I guess
I would agree with that on this first one. The other two kind of overlap, but for this first one, we could go ahead and do that. I don't think there's a problem unless one of the council members objects. Councilmember Hayford O'Leary?
I guess I'd still prefer that we talk about sort of our opinions of it together as a package of all three. I agree the second two are more interrelated. So to me, my suggested process would be that if we have questions about the details of these projects, that we ask them now while the presenter is up for that project, and then at the conclusion of the presentations, we're able to talk about our sort of policy opinions of the whole thing.
sure.
That seems reasonable. So
Thank
let's
you.
proceed that way. Are there questions for Mr. Powers? All right, Councilmember Whalen.
Just to confirm, my understanding is to the community consensus aspect that we do not have Minneapolis's support for this proposal.
Yes, that's correct. So Richfield staff has met 2 or 3 times in the last few months with Minneapolis staff. They have shown interest in the project. They, as staff level, would like to support it. They do have in their published transportation action plan by the Minneapolis City Council a pretty strictly worded, not statute, but goal of not supporting any highway expansion in or around Minneapolis. That's coming from an equity perspective from their council. That being said, senior staff at Minneapolis have indicated that they'd like to continue working with our staff here in Richfield to advance this project, potentially adding improvements into Minneapolis on the Highway 77, Cedar Avenue kind of transition from highway to local roadway, the south end of Lake Nokomis. Our staff here in Richfield is very supportive of that. We look forward to moving that forward. But you're correct. They're currently not supporting our application, and we do anticipate that that would cause the application to not score highly enough to be awarded funding at this round. But we are asking council to support it moving forward because we would like to keep pursuing this project, look at additional grant funding opportunities, and ultimately come up with a project that we think can be beneficial to both Richfield and Minneapolis in a big way.
Thank you.
Mr. Powers, I was curious, and I wondered if you couldn't expand a little bit. I'm maybe not as familiar as I'd like to be with Minneapolis's, not speaking for the city as a whole, but the equity concerns they had with this particular project. Is it with this project in particular, or just a posture towards expansion as a whole that has the equity component?
Yeah, thanks, Councilmember Troutman. I don't think they have equity concerns with this project. What it says in their transportation action plan, and I don't have it in front of me, so I don't want to try to quote it, but it's something along the lines of Minneapolis will oppose highway expansion in recognition of the historical equity wrongdoings of some sort. That I think everyone can acknowledge that that's been a thing with highway expansion over the last century, everywhere, and especially in Minneapolis. So they're recognizing those historical problems with highway expansion, and they've taken a fairly black and white stance in that transportation action plan.
Thank you. All right. Well, if there are no other questions, I think that's as tough as it gets, Mr. Powers. Thank
Great.
you very much.
Thank you, Council. I'd like to welcome Amy Marone from the City of Bloomington. Amy is a traffic engineer with City of Bloomington Public Works, and I will pull up her presentation and let her speak to you. Management Analyst Swanson, could you help me get this up? I'm not able to close this out.
Well, while we have a moment of technical difficulties, I'd just like to acknowledge our former colleague and council member and former state representative, Edwina Garcia, who's in the audience. It's good to see you, friend.
Good evening, Council. As Joe said, I'm Amy Marone with City of Bloomington, and happy to be here tonight to bring this request to the City of Richfield. So we're requesting approval of resolutions of support for 2 494 Corridors of Commerce project submittals. And I won't have very many slides because Joe did an excellent job of setting this up, and I know that you've had a lot of conversations about the 494 project as a whole. But so we're here tonight to request the resolution of support for both of these funding applications. We're going to start with a very brief overview of the 494 vision, which you can see in the graphic shows that it is a study that resulted in recommendations for 494 between 169 and the airport. All right. Many of you are familiar with the long history of studies along the 494. This graphic was put together by MnDOT just to show the planning efforts that have taken place since 2000. And they have cultivated into a study that started in 2018, which was the last time that I was before your council, where we had a joint city council meeting between Bloomington and Richfield to kick off the study process for the 494 vision. So the vision study has been completed. The recommendations include easy pass lanes in both directions from Highway 169 to just east of Highway 77, the 494 35W intersection improvements, as well as access changes at Nicollet, Portland, and 12th Avenue. The project goals for the vision study were to provide transit advantage and increase the number of people who can be efficiently moved to the area, improve travel time reliability, improve safety, restore pavement to preserve infrastructure and provide a smoother ride, and improve drainage systems to reduce local flooding, and reduce runoff to the Minnesota River. You'll recall that this results in an extremely large project for the corridor, and for the purpose of being able to actually construct it, the the project as a whole, the vision as a whole, was broken down into 9 different elements, and those packaged together based on evaluation of constructability, cost, phasing, and equity to identify the best way to move these forward. And we're all happy to see that project number 1 is starting construction later this summer. So Joe already completely covered what the 494 corridors, what the corridors of commerce funding opportunity presents. And so as project partners and members of the Policy Advisory Commission Committee for the 494 Vision, we've all been tasked with trying to identify funding opportunities to move forward the phases of the 494 Vision. That's why we come to you tonight with a request to support the City of Bloomington's project submittal, which includes improvements at 82nd Street interchange, as well as the railroad bridge over 494 just east of Nicollet Avenue. The 82nd Street improvements, the graphics that you see here, I know it's a little bit difficult to see, but just wanted to give a proximity of the location. It does also include a little bit of work for the eastbound to southbound ramp for 494 to southbound 35W. There's some braid bridges to make that movement, reduce some conflict. So it does have improvements to the 494 corridor safety and congestion reduction as well. It also addresses several drainage issues in the area, as well as just the grade changes. And we've had that 82nd Street bridge has been struck in the past because it is lower, has less clearance than the rest of the bridges on the corridor. And then, of course, you've heard much about the railroad bridge. It will be the last element east of 35W that needs to be widened for future Easy Pass construction. All right, and then I also have the package for the 494 Corridor Commission submittal, which includes that same railroad bridge. We're always looking for opportunities to eliminate that last barrier for Easy Pass, as well as the Easy Pass in both the eastbound and westbound directions on I-494 between 35W and Trunk Highway 77. We just really wanted to point out why Bloomington supports both project submittals. So the full 494 vision benefits are really only realized once the full vision is constructed. Bloomington and the surrounding communities have long suffered the impacts of excessive congestion on 494. And as we all know, that regional traffic quickly shifts onto the local system, pushing all of those safety and congestion concerns onto local roadways. The improvements to 494 improve all modes of transportation across the entire system. This project is of regional and statewide significance. Lots of factors contribute to that, but it was clearly demonstrated with the 19 letters of support for project phase 1. There are benefits to commerce on and near the corridor. The project has worked to minimize right-of-way impacts. The project provides needed drainage improvements, and these improvements are finally being implemented after decades of need and planning. Much of the work has been completed in communities adjacent to 494 in anticipation of these improvements. Just end with leaving the request up here, but I really appreciate the opportunity to come to you tonight and certainly available to answer any question.
Thank you very much.
Go ahead.
Thank you, Ms. Marone. I did have just kind of a narrower question about 82nd Street. I'm assuming you may have seen the sort of list of criteria our staff have created to help us understand the details of these projects, air quality improvements, ownership, that sort of thing. One that's a priority, I think, for Richfield and certainly for me as well personally is multimodal transportation. And their comments, of course, they have more to say about their own project than your project, but they mentioned that they're replacing a bridge, 82nd Street, that currently has a really bad, narrow sidewalk. They also mentioned the Metro Transit Orange Line uses it. So I'm just wondering, the new bridge that would be funded by this, if this goes forward, what would that do for multimodal? Would it improve transit operations? Would it have a bike facility?
Councilmember Hayford O'Leary, yeah, so the preliminary layout that we've worked through with MnDOT certainly does address a lot of the pedestrian and bicycle issues on there. It's been a new topic where we have brought it up and said we would like to have some transit priority for the Orange Line route on this bridge. The details of what the cross-section would look like with that element haven't been finalized, but it's something that's definitely going to be consideration, and we'll work closely with Met Transit to find out their input on that as well. A full transit study related to the bridge and their needs on that bridge hadn't been completed at the time of the application. So it is being loosely addressed in the application, but as far as the finalized cross-section will still be worked out if the project is awarded.
Okay, thank you.
I had a few questions, if now's the time. First of all, can you remind me, I should know this, the estimated cost for the Two Bridges project?
Yes. The estimated construction costs are $57 million. However, I will say that was based on the vision plan. And when we submit these applications, MnDOT has an independent team that is evaluating the cost, like in kind of current dollars, and would to be able to compare them all equally.
Okay. And was it like 9 million? That's the railroad bridge that is included in both projects right now?
So recently, the railroad bridge estimate has been up to 17 million because it does include still quite a bit of work on both sides of the freeway.
Okay. And then my more substantive questions. For the Easy Pass lanes, we received, and I think at multiple points, but received the traffic projections for 494 and for the cross streets. I've seen that one of the claimed benefits is pulling traffic off of the parallel routes. Do we have projections or numbers for what we'd expect to see on 77th or American if that were put in or if it wasn't?
Councilmember Whalen, there are projections. There's a traffic volume projection map. I don't have access to that with me right now. I will say what we've seen when I looked closely at the traffic volumes on American Boulevard was not a significant reduction of volumes on American. It really is an arterial roadway that was, designed to carry some of that parallel route traffic. What we did see a shift in is some reduction in like our 84th Street, which is a collector street that runs parallel to 494. And so we anticipate seeing the roadways that run east-west parallel, but a little bit further away from 494 to start seeing the most reduction in that cut-through traffic. And we all know what those routes are through each of our local jurisdictions, and that's where we are anticipating and where the modeling did show more reduction.
Okay. And then I've asked our staff, my understanding is that the hard numbers don't exist and maybe would come later in the process, but for the transit benefit, have you seen any numbers in terms of, I know Metro Transit does not have plans at this time to utilize the Easy Pass lanes if they're put in. I know there are some of the other transit providers and certainly like airport shuttles from hotels that would benefit from that. Have we quantified that at all?
Councilmember Whalen, I don't believe that we have been provided with that exact information to answer your question.
Okay, thank you.
And we can come back to that if someone from the Corridor Commission perhaps has an answer when they come up later. Are there other questions for our guests from Bloomington? Thank you, Ms. Marone.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor. And now we have an old friend returning to Richfield. Melissa Madison is the I-494 Corridor Commission Executive Director, and the chair for the Corridor Commission, Council Member Rebecca Shack, also an old friend and colleague. So welcome. And are you presenting together or individually? Oh, wonderful. Come on up.
Good evening, Mayor Supple and council members. Thank you for the opportunity to present to you this evening. My name is Melissa Madison, the Executive Director of the 494 Corridor Commission. So a question that we're often asked is, who are the members of the 494 Corridor Commission and how long have we been an organization? So we formed back in 1986 when the cities of Richfield, Bloomington, Edina, Eden Prairie, and Minnetonka wished to work together jointly on transportation projects and improvements on 494. And we want to give you some context about the 494 corridor. 19% of the metro area population lives along this corridor, and 21% of the metro area jobs are located on or near the corridor. There's over 313,000 jobs near the corridor compared with both of the, or there's actually more jobs along 494 than both of the downtowns combined. And we're only counting from 394 over to the airport, not all of the jobs in additional cities, just counting our own member cities. And the 494 segment between 169 and the airport is heavily traveled. In fact, people from all but 2 counties use this stretch of 494 on a daily basis. So there's 87 counties in Minnesota, and people from 85 of 87 use the stretch of 494 daily. And that is because people are traveling to the 2 biggest destinations in the state, which neighbor Richfield, being the Minneapolis-St. Paul Airport and the Mall of America. The 494 Corridor Commission held a study of commute behavior on 494 to identify what modes people use as they commute to work. And we found 95% drive alone, 4% carpool, 1% bicycle and take transit. And in the same study, 30% indicated they would be willing to try transit, and another 30% were open to carpooling. And that is when the Corridor Commission hired staff to, instead of just looking at what road and transit projects back in 1986 were they interested in moving forward, but they decided to take both a supply and demand side approach to the work that we do, because we believe that we cannot build our way out of traffic congestion, and we know that we cannot have unlimited laden roads. And so the Corridor Commission embraces and promotes transit, carpooling, van pooling, bicycling as transportation, walking, telework, and Easy Pass. We see those as smart investments. And approximately 95% of our budget and efforts support commuters and residents with transportation options other than driving alone. We provide individualized assistance to residents and to commuters. We help people identify someone to carpool with or to join or start a van pool. We do customized transit trip planning for people from where they are starting to where they need to go, and we give them the corresponding transit schedules and itinerary and 2 free passes so they can try transit. And we have deep bicycle commuting resources. We help people learn about the Guaranteed Ride Home, which is one of the region's best kept secrets, we say. So it provides people a safety net in case they have carpooled or taken transit and they need to get back home, or maybe to pick up their child from school. So it gives people a safety net. We also have robust resources for telework and hybrid work, and all of these resources are available in multiple languages. The Easy Pass is recommended on 494 because it aligns with regional plans. It provides an option for future transit. It is a sustainable option for the future. And according to MnDOT studies, 494 will become more congested without an easy pass lane. The Metropolitan Council had let us know that they plan to submit the same Easy Pass Quarters of Commerce application as what we ended up submitting. And so the region sees this as very significant. MnDOT tested several options for improving the level of service and safety on 494. It might be hard to see all of the text on this slide, but they compared having doing nothing, basically a no-build scenario, compared to a general purpose lane being built, compared with a MnPass lane. And so MnPass was recently rebranded to Easy Pass. So you'll hear us talk about both MnPass and Easy Pass. So the MnPass scores better for many of the categories that were looked at. So it's the MnPass Easy Pass scores better than a general purpose lane for person throughput, for improving travel times, for reducing travel delays, and providing a transit advantage. And person throughput is a concept where more people can travel through the same area on transit or in a carpool versus those who drive alone. This information was provided by MnDOT. The majority of people using MnPass are carpooling or riding transit. And single occupant MnPass customers make up 32% of total vehicles in the lane, but are only representing 12% of total people in the lane. An Easy Pass can move 2 times more people than a general purpose lane during congestion. There are many benefits. There's an intersection between transportation and health outcomes. So there's benefits to people spending less time sitting in traffic congestion. The longer people spend idling in their cars in traffic congestion, the worse it is for their health. And the same research found the longer people's car commutes are, the more likely they are to have elevated blood pressure. And we think these 3 examples, they're probably not using Easy Pass. So a modest increase in physical activity decreases depression and diabetes. And more people carpooling and using transit in the Easy Pass lanes reduces transportation emissions, which is something that is important to focus on. And reduced CO2 emissions is better for everyone's health. And Richfield can demonstrate environmental leadership by supporting the Easy Pass lane. And now we'll turn it over to the chair of our board.
Good evening, Council, Mayor Supple, Councilmember Troutman, the rest of Council. Thanks for having us. Try to keep it, the rest of my comments quite brief. I'm a council member for the city of Minnetonka. And, I wanted to provide you with a little bit of a historical, big level reason that both we, as the board of the Corridor Commission and the Minnetonka, supports the project. Really from a historical perspective, right, transportation has been important to civilizations really since medieval times. It's efficient movement of people and goods, which has allowed civilization to thrive and grow. But historically speaking, we can't build our way out of growing populations and economies. In the past, I think we kind of resigned ourselves that road construction and development is inevitable. We've really had to shift perspective over the last century to solutions that recognize the congestion and try to avoid congestion and encourage people to take a more sustainable commute. It's not possible, again, to have unlimited lanes. The effective operations of the region's interstate and highway systems are critical to the growth of the Twin Cities economy and the economy along the corridor and throughout the state, as Melissa mentioned. the relationship with commerce and construction can get cyclical, and we recognize commerce creates demands for larger roads and runways and road repairs, and we're trying to support projects that recognize the need, but also explore creative solutions to meeting the demand. Over time, we have the benefit of time and historical studies. Innovations have helped determine strategies that work better than others. Smart growth with incentives to carpool, take transit, walk are essential strategies. High occupancy vehicle lanes such as Easy Pass are the prime example of successful congestion mitigation, and ultimately our hope and some preliminary data shows that can lead to a reduction in emissions. All of you probably know that 494 and 394 both cut through Minnetonka. Through the late 90s and the early 2000s, we saw in Minnetonka the first high occupancy vehicle lanes introduced in Minnesota, really along 394. These lanes have been critical for connectivity into downtown and are very popular with our residents and folks who do business in our city. We have a situation, if you go farther out of Minnetonka, but along 394, where building out is not an option. And so we've been really creative with how we can lower congestion. I will tell you, as a commuter, that's not always successful. But I think that, just as a brief anecdote, I am one of those people that does cut through, and I'm sure my friends in St. Louis Park and Golden Valley probably don't love the route that I take through their cities in order to avoid congestion on days when it's really bad. So really, I think that is a real concern and something that this project tries to alleviate here on 494. Continued smart growth and increased connectivity like we have on 394 helps position the Twin Cities and Greater Minnesota for new opportunities. Minnetonka, along with the cities of Eden Prairie, Edina, and Bloomington, who are all part of the I-94 Corridor Commission, support the full vision of the 494 to 169 project. As staff referenced, we're pushing it close. Tomorrow is the deadline for the letters of support to come. We believe that if we don't have support from all the cities along this project, that the project will not move on. So thanks again for having us tonight. Appreciate your thoughtfulness on this request.
All right, did we have any questions? All right, Councilmember Whalen.
Apologies, I didn't realize, I know Bloomington spoke to both, but didn't realize that there was still a third presentation. So I guess I would ask the same question. Do we have any quantified data about the transit benefit of how many people are currently using 494 who would have then the Easy Pass lane to have more reliable service, or other non-metro transit versions that would plan to use it?
Councilmember Whalen, thank you for that question. We do not have data on that.
Councilmember Hayford. Oh, go ahead.
Oh, sorry. Could I add that transit using an Easy Pass lane would allow for 8,000 people to move through the corridor on an hourly basis versus 2,000 people who could move through a car.
All right, Councilmember Hayford O'Leary.
Thank you. I've got a few questions. I think the thing that jumped out to me most about your presentation was 95% of people on the 494 corridor drive alone. And I appreciate working, in a suburban environment with commuters. It's very difficult to get people to change the way that they get around. But that just feels like such a failure for all of us, for us as a region. It's such an insurmountable problem. 95% of people drive alone. And I have to think that part of it is that, of course, we don't have transit on 494. We don't have good options. But a lot of it has to be that driving must be pretty attractive if 19 out of 20 people are doing it. So I guess my question is, I don't know, what do we do about that? I mean, I hear about, we work with companies and we come up with alternatives, but at a certain point, if driving just gets better and we're adding more lanes to improve it, aren't people just going to keep driving alone?
Well, I think that Councilmember Hayford or Leary, thank you for that question. I think that if we did not provide other alternatives and try to reduce some of the unattractive barriers or the unattractive elements of using an alternative mode, which, for example, people who live in a suburb and work in a suburb can oftentimes we see that they need to take 3 buses to get where they need to go, and it can take an hour and a half to travel one way. And so for people where that's the situation, some do choose to take transit, and they'll do something like read or pay their bills while they're using transit. We have been able to do quite a bit, but there's more to do to help increase bicycle as a transportation option instead of just commuting, or sorry, I didn't mean to say commuting, instead of bicycling as recreation. So Minnesota is progressive in that area. But I think if we only focused on roads, yes, we would continue to see the mode split be what it is.
Thank you. Another sort of big question we've heard a lot, it was mentioned in the Bloomington presentation, certainly we've had this conversation about this 2017-2018 vision document, and that's a big motivation for why we're pursuing these projects, if I understand that correctly. My big question, I think this is a question for the council as well, but I'd like to know your opinion on it. The world changed a lot since 2017. For better or for worse, probably the biggest thing that impacted driving alone was forced telework over COVID. We know that there are seemingly permanent changes, or at least very long-term changes in terms of reduction of traffic volumes. I've read that rush hour is shorter every day. The peak hour, the peak commute has shifted differently. So there's less of a problem, frankly, with congestion than there was in 2017. And I guess my question is, why is that plan? Why should that still guide us?
Well, I think Councilmember Hayford or Larry, I think we're in a fluid situation right now. We haven't settled on what post-pandemic commuting and post-pandemic travel will be. One of the things that we do through our commuter services staff is survey employers on a quarterly basis to find out what their current picture is of telework and mode split of their employees. And we also survey commuters on a quarterly basis. So we survey 4,000 commuters quarterly and 1,200 employers quarterly to find out. And then the numbers are still moving each survey. So right now we're in a situation where employers want their employees to come back to the brick and mortar workplace. And it's the employees that don't all want to return. They want flexibility and they want a hybrid work situation.
Do you know approximately what percentage of employers you survey still do some form of telework?
It's a very high percentage. I could follow up with an email.
Thank you. I think that's everything I've got. Thank you.
All right, Councilmember Troutman.
I just wanted to say a word of thanks to the Corridor Commission and to you, Executive Director Madison, and for you, Councilmember Shack. I know coming out on a Tuesday evening is a commitment in and of its own. But as I reflect back on the process and the priorities that Richfield's had for transportation in the last several years, I know when I first joined the council, it was not exactly clear how we could work and partner with the Corridor Commission and how vital and important partnerships were between cities. But when in a very sharp tangent, when I was in law school, I had the opportunity to study human rights in North Korea very briefly. And Korea has a tradition of saying we're a shrimp amongst whales. And when they looked around to the region, there was Russia and there was China and there was Japan. And Korea historically and presently always has to be nimble to advocate for itself. And part of our responsibilities and leadership as a council is to be nimble and recognize that we are a smaller city amongst larger cities, amongst, with MnDOT being a very large institution. And I just want to recognize and say thank you to the Corridor Commission for really helping us be nimble and advocate for our priorities in the city. And so I think that's historically important, and I appreciate the partnership and the ability to dialogue and refine what are really strong common goals over the years. So thank you for that.
All right, I believe you had more to say.
Oh, may I make a comment? Thank you, Councilmember Troutman. So transportation is a system and not a segment, and so that's what we would really like you to think about as you're pondering the letter of support that we've requested. And that's a really fascinating, not story, but thank you, anecdote that you shared. Thank you so much.
Well, thank you very much.
Councilmember Whalen?
Since the benefits really are from Easy Pass lanes, have we, one of the other things that has changed pretty drastically in the last year is our state legislature. Has there been any talk of reconsidering the ban on converting an existing lane to Easy Pass? And is there a reason that has not been explored in more detail?
Councilmember Whalen, thank you for your question. I think that it hasn't formally come up that I've heard, but I know that our lobbyist asks us to be prepared to answer questions like that, to give a position on that. So I'm just not aware that they are formally revisiting it, though. Okay. If that answers.
Mayor.
And I will just add, we work really closely just to be with Senator Dibble and Representative Hornstein, who chair the commissions or committees, and we haven't heard directly from them, to the best of our knowledge, through our communication, that that's something that they're necessarily looking for feedback on. I think MnDOT has done some internal studying on that and does not believes that will exacerbate some problems and not resolve congestion issues at this point. But we haven't formulated a specific position.
Mayor,
go ahead.
May I address that? So that was actually miscommunicated at some point. There is no ban at the state level to take a general purpose lane and use it for an Easy Pass lane, and it has actually happened, and they're discussing it for a project right now. And I have some details I can follow up with you on that. I did reach out to Met Council to talk about this specifically, and they said for this particular quarter, since it's one of the most congested in the upper Midwest, that it would not be technically practical, nor would it be politically practical.
All right, are there further questions?
Sorry,
Go ahead, Councilmember Whalen.
Thank you, Mayor. I have one more. I think part of my, it's maybe obvious at this point, I'm somewhat skeptical. A part of it comes from the projections, which, as Councilmember Hayford O'Leary pointed out, are from pre-pandemic data. But even they, looking at the difference, there's many parts of Project 1 that I am very happy about. And so comparing to no build is no longer really that relevant. It's comparing just project one to the full vision. And I, not being a traffic expert, had a hard time sort of quantifying like what the impact on congestion would be. Obviously, there's benefits to the easy pass lanes for all of the reasons that you named, but in terms of congestion in the general lanes, looking at like a projection out 20 years, there were, out of, I can't even remember how many different sections there were, and at multiple times a day, the like little chart they lay out, there were 18 marked as F with project one and 13 marked as F with the full build, which I mean obviously tells me, and I've heard staff confirm, like we're not going to get to a place where traffic is going even 40 miles an hour through consistently during rush hour. And then I mean 7 at level E versus 3 at level E. I guess, is there a more plain terms explanation of like how much better the full vision addresses congestion than if it is just project one?
See if my notes speak to that.
I can say I don't believe that information exists. I think the limitations on the studies and micro didn't allow for that, but Melissa can check. I think your point is well taken, and I do think, to dovetail with Councilmember Hafer O'Leary's question, that as congestion continues to build in the general purpose lanes, I think there is some enhanced incentivizing of using the transit or carpooling to get into the easy pass lane. You know, in our work in Minnetonka with Metro Transit, one of the issues that ridership begets more routes, right? So it can be a snowball effect that as more people ride or are incentivized to ride, more routes are developed, more people, they're more attractive routes and more people ride. So I think that is the vision as we see it from another council member's perspective.
Go ahead.
Thank you,
Director Asher.
Mayor and Councilmember Whalen. I just wanted to add that I think although the numbers may not exist specifically to answer the question, if you don't add the full easy pass that's been identified in the vision, you're not fully utilizing the ones that will go in with project one. And if you can imagine, the congestion and the numbers will probably maximum right at the interchange, right, where the 35 and 494 meet. So if you're only building to the west and you're not building to the east, and we know that the numbers do exist for project one, where in the general purpose lanes, they get more congested east of interchange because of the easy pass lanes to the west. I mean, I think that's probably the best that you're going to get on that. There's not going to be actual numbers.
Yeah, and I guess my point is it's a lot of money for something that I know the projections once the full build is done are that I can't remember if anything was labeled F. It's very much better for as soon as it's completed, but that's after 2-3 years of construction where it's probably worse than it is now, and 20 years after it's built, it is worse than it is now, no matter what outcome we look at. And I literally just today, I typically don't have a commute, but today was driving from Northeast Minneapolis back here during rush hour, and the massive 35W project that does have a ton of dedicated transit routes along it that is within a couple years of being completed is already busy and has stop and go traffic again. And I guess I'm just skeptical that we're not, I mean, to your own point, the building more lanes, I don't see that necessarily addressing congestion. I think the transit option is great, but it's unclear what that even looks like yet. And that's where my comments are coming from.
Could I?
All right. Go ahead.
I was just going to make a suggestion that we have a vote that we need to vote on, and maybe to the extent that we have dialogue, we should have that, and we should maybe. I'm sure Councilmember Shack would want to jump in the council decision, but maybe we should focus on questions that they could have, and then we could have the dialogue.
All right, so is there an additional question, Councilmember Hayford O'Leary?
I did just have more of, I guess, a request as we think about sort of future projects and the way the commission discusses them. I did really appreciate Councilmember Whalen asking about converting existing lanes to min pass. I understand that's a not completely explored topic and one where there's confusion, but it would be great if we sort of talked about A or B, like either, three: new general purpose, new easy pass, existing easy pass, and talk about those in tandem. Because your presentation makes a great case for why we should do easy pass lanes. I'm sold. What I'm not sold on is building another lane. So if it's general purpose or easy pass, 100% easy pass. But it's tough when we kind of conflate a widening project with the use of the tool easy pass. So I would just love to see that distinction in the future. Thank you.
All right. Well, thank you to all of our speakers. We appreciate you all joining us tonight. And then I'll turn it back over to Councilmember Troutman to process the vote.
Thank you, Mayor, and thank you to all our speakers. So I think we'll take these all individually. Is that correct? So and now while I'm talking, I'm scrolling, and I scrolled right past our resolutions.
Page 23.
Thank you. So I would move that we adopt the resolution of support for the City of Richfield's application for a proposed project on Trunk Highway 62 between Portland Avenue and Trunk Highway 77, including a reconfiguration for the Trunk Highway 62/Trunk Highway 77 interchange.
I'll second that. Okay, it's been moved and seconded. Is there discussion? Councilmember Hayford O'Leary.
I think my starting point, kind of similar in ways to the Minneapolis plan that's been mentioned, is that expansion of freeways is harmful, especially in a community like Richfield, where we're so ringed by freeways. We have an incredible density of freeways, and we can't escape their influence. And you'll hear a lot more about that on the 494 items. In this case, I do actually think this is a really unique project that brings a lot of benefit to Richfield, and most of that wouldn't be possible without the expansion. And we talked about that in our work sessions of like getting the sound walls as a standalone would be almost impossible. Getting the bridge fixed would be almost impossible. And notably, the expansion piece actually addresses an issue which there's broad consensus is a problem, which is the high traffic and the crash issues on Portland and 66th. So for that reason, I do support this item. If it does not go through this time, I hope we can have better dialogue with Minneapolis to perhaps help them see the unique aspects of this versus a general expansion.
Councilmember Whalen.
Just in general, maybe this is repeating things that are already clear, but in considering these, I really appreciate the projects that focus on like problem intersections for safety improvements, the ways that we've incorporated into this particular project and previous ones, pedestrian improvements, and would agree that the particular unique cut through of Portland to 66th in this scenario warrants the special consideration. And yes, the fact that the pedestrian bridge and sound walls could not be gotten otherwise. I am in support of this one, obviously with the question of where Minneapolis is at, we'll see. But appreciate the insight on the interchange in particular. And yeah, that's what I have for this one.
All right, thank you. Any other comments? I do support this particular resolution because I think it does help to deal with the cut-through traffic that goes on Portland and 66th, and we see that happening a lot. And so I think that's something that'll help the local safety and the local traffic movement. All right. Councilmember Troutman.
Sorry, Mayor. Just one item that I was going to mention that I just mentioned briefly at the beginning, but I feel is worth lifting up, is that if I'm correct, Director Asher, one of the secondary benefits to this is that it also improves congestion in an exchange that was relatively recently rebuilt. And I think we remember, those of us who have been in Richfield for quite a long time, what it was before, what it was after. And, sometimes progress is slow and uneven in transportation. And when we have opportunities like this to move something forward, that I think most residents that drive between Minneapolis into Richfield, going north into Richfield, say, well, why isn't it this way? This is an opportunity to make the road the way I think a lot of Richfielders intuit it should be. And so that in addition to all the other reasons that my colleagues have shared, I would support it.
All right. Any further comments? All right. All in favor of adopting the resolution, please say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? We've adopted the first resolution.
All right, then we have motion number 2. I move that we adopt a resolution of support for the City of Bloomington's application for a proposed project at the 82nd Street /30 I-35 interchange and reconstruction of the railroad bridge over I-494 at Pleasant Avenue.
All right, discussion. Oh, I'll second that. Then we'll have a discussion. Sorry. All right, Councilmember Hayford O'Leary.
I was struck by one of the phrases that they used in the 494 Corridor Commission used in the presentation. We believe we cannot build our way out of congestion with unlimited lane roads. And I certainly agree. I'm reminded of a comparison I sometimes make, or a phenomenon I notice when it comes to housing projects, where people will say, I support affordable housing, but this project, I don't support this project. This one has these problems. And we kind of seem to do the opposite of that with roads. Like we all say, oh, we've learned our way, we can't build our way out of congestion, but this project, this lane is a good one. This one's different. And in a little bit of a way, it is different. It is Easy Pass, that helps. But I think we're making excuses for doing the exact same thing we've been doing that has failed us. It is alarming to see that 95% of people drive alone. And it seems really obvious, but adding an additional lane to a highway on a highway corridor with no transit will not change that number. It will not improve that number. There's so much, and I compare even these projects. The Richfield application is cost effective. It offers all these benefits. It does so much. And the 494 project, particularly the more expensive one, just doesn't do any of that. It is a standalone highway expansion project that doesn't offer much to Richfield except bringing more cars through us. And I appreciate, and I've given a lot of thought, Mayor Supple, to your comments about sort of, standing up for regional partners. I thought that was a really important consideration. But I can't get over the fact that this concept that we agreed to was before COVID, and everything has changed, and we're continuing to move it forward. I did note, just trying to look this up a little bit, that it was Star Tribune March 2022 that rush hour was still much shorter. Traffic volumes have been pretty slow to steady, and we don't really know much of the benefits, unlike the Crosstown project on local freeways. The benefit to local roadways if this improvement goes through. The other things I want to mention, I think the political possibilities are changing here too. As was noted, the legislature has changed. There's a lot more pressure from neighboring cities about this. Minneapolis has this perhaps extreme policy of saying never. St. Paul has a similar policy where they want to reduce VMT. And I think that will create pressure on the state to come up with new possibilities on how to approach these roads. Those possibilities might include doing more Easy Pass lanes, out of existing capacity. It might include doing a transit improvement with a highway expansion. But we don't get to use any of those possibilities if we say, yes, let's build a new lane as soon as possible. We're stuck with this lane, whatever we build now, for the next 70 years, and it's not going to get better if we make it worse now. So it's hard to find things to like about this, again, particularly the expansion project. I think it would harm Richfield. I think it will increase the amount of traffic that goes through Richfield. Whatever congestion reduction benefit will be quickly erased by the attraction of new cars to that roadway. All of that said, I do have a compromise to suggest if there's interest. I do think the projects, although they both don't seem as great as the Richfield project, I don't think they're equivalent. I think the 82nd Street project does have some value in that in some ways that should have been included in project one. It is a really old interchange. It is overused. It has issues. I don't know how to do this since we are considering these separately, but basically I would say if we had consensus that that project were worth moving forward, I would be happy to support that and not the additional one, but as on an individual basis, I would not support either project. The primary concern with the 82nd Street project is simply that it does increase capacity and set the stage for widening 494. So that's where I'm at right now. Thank you.
All right, additional comments? Councilmember Troutman?
Thank you, Mayor. And it's interesting because in public meetings, we only have a limited amount of time to talk. We don't necessarily get the opportunity to talk everything out privately like we'd like to. And I appreciate both the insight that Councilmember Hayford O'Leary and Councilmember Whalen have, and I think even that everybody has acknowledged here that we can't build our way out of traffic congestion. But I think there are a number of there are a couple of reasons why I'm supporting both motion number 2 and then ultimately the third motion. And one of those is that I think even MnDOT has acknowledged the thing that we're trying to do is not fix a problem that's just endemic in the structure and the volume and the consequence of economic growth, which we're generally glad for. I do think that when we started this process, only for me, maybe 5 years ago, but I know my efforts are predated by a lot of staff and a lot of council members and a lot of leaders. We have one of them here tonight that have been wrestling with this corridor for generations. And I think of Councilmember Garcia's, when we were negotiating with MnDOT, she brought her House file from 25 years ago to get the underpass funded, and it wasn't funded. And to even get to that stage and get promises fulfilled that were a generation old, we had to work hard. We had to work together. We had to be really strategic. And I'm really pleased with the progress that Richfield has made, the progress that our staff has made, that our partners have made. We got the underpass that was for years not a part of the conversation, was disciplinedly excluded from the conversation to be centered in the conversation in one of the more powerful moments in government, frankly, with the Policy Action Committee. MnDOT freely acknowledged when asked directly by Councilmember Howard, how has equity been considered in the vision for this project? MnDOT frankly said, well, they said it's been indirectly considered. And that gave, and the policy committee did its work. And the work was to say, well, when you indirectly consider equity, you actually are not considering equity at all. And that forced everybody to go back to the drawing the drawing board, and the fruit of that was a rescoring with a specific equity lens, and that resulted in a benefit to our city. And I know I'm saying that not to distract. If I could hear the thoughts of my colleagues, they said, well, that doesn't have anything to do with an extra lane on 494, Councilmember Troutman. But to me, it does, like Executive Director Madison said, transportation is a system, and we're part of a system, and part of the process of getting the things that were important to our city was to participate in good faith in this vision. And so I think the comments, and we haven't talked about the environmental impacts and global warming, and that it's real, and that the increase of of CO2 into our atmosphere is a crisis we have to reckon with, and so I think that belongs in this conversation, I think explicitly. But that being said, I'm going to support the project. I think this is overall good for Richfield, better for Richfield than it certainly was years before, and I appreciate the partnerships and the collaboration that we've had as a region. So I'm going to support it.
Okay, additional comments? All right, Councilmember Whalen.
Thank you, Mayor. I'll say my comments on the third project. I do plan to support this second one. I agree with the comment that 82nd really is similar to the interchanges that both Richfield and Bloomington are benefiting from in Project 1 of 12th and Portland and Nicollet. And so I know the Richfield impacted portion is the railroad bridge, but the piece of this I'm most excited about, frankly, for the region is the 82nd interchange there for both the safety reasons, the multimodal reasons, and all of that. I do have some concern with the railroad bridge that I guess to me, and this was before my time, and so I may be missing pieces of it, but it feels like we have invested a lot of money in widening previous bridges that ended up, particularly Lyndale, being wider than we may even need. And so I think it's worth replacing the railroad bridge just because it's old and doesn't look very nice. And would need to get replaced eventually, but I do have some concern that to the third project, which we'll discuss, building an extremely wide railroad bridge may not be the best use of money, but we'll be supporting this proposal.
Thank you. Any additional comments? I think that, again, the 82nd Street will help with the local traffic, and so I want to support our friends in Bloomington with that because they've been supporting us in some of our projects. And I think we all need to think about it as a region because it is a system. As far as the railroad bridge, I thought it was interesting when they said it was in fair condition. So that means it's not going to like fall down tomorrow, but it doesn't mean that it's in tip-top fabulous condition. So I do think we need to replace that. So I will be supporting this resolution. Any last comments? All right, then we're going to vote on the second motion here. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. All opposed? All right. Oh.
I'll do an aye.
Okay, so you're voting aye? Okay, so we've passed the resolution. Next, we'll move on to the third motion.
All right, I'll move that we adopt the resolution of support for I-494 Corridor Commission's application for a proposed project to add easy pass lanes on 494 and I-35 to Trunk Highway 77 and reconstruction of the railroad bridge over I-494 at Pleasant Avenue.
Second. All right, discussion. All right, go ahead, Councilmember Whalen.
Thank you, Mayor. I've said some of this already. Ultimately, just want to be very clear. My stance is not that this is never going to be a good idea. Ultimately, think that it is, not to count votes before the discussion is done, I think it will pass and the commission and our partners could simply move forward, and that would be fine. I guess the things that I would hope for, and perhaps we just disagree with whether this conversation should continue before or after approving a funding request like this. But one, I really wish that we would have a more serious conversation about transit before moving ahead with something like this. Right now, Metro Transit's plans for the corridor are a bus rapid transit line not on 494, but between the mall in Eden Prairie and Mall of America along American Boulevard. And I don't know that we know if that were built first, how much traffic does that pull off 494? Would they be open to moving that onto 494 if that would be proved to serve more riders? I don't know. But the current claim that it supports transit, we haven't actually discussed that or seen data. The other thing that we haven't seen the full data on is the greenhouse gas emissions impact. I think it's an open question whether, to Councilmember Hayford O'Leary's comments about more people driving when there's more lanes to use, I agree that if the result was more people using transit, more people carpooling, less people just sitting and idling, that could absolutely improve greenhouse gas emissions. But it to me feels like so far we're claiming that without actually having any data yet. I also, just to my comments before, I think even the claim that it improves congestion is complicated. It does in some ways, and also doesn't. There's still going to be congestion even if we spend $200 million on this. I think it's really important as we continue to talk about this corridor that we are telling the story about how 85 counties use it every day, and 75% of the traffic on it is local. And to that, again, appalling stat that 95% of people are driving themselves, if it's someone from War Road who needs to catch a flight, we're probably never going to have a transit option for them. I get that. But if it's someone who's commuting every day along this corridor to their job, that again seems like really what we should be planning for and addressing, rather than just assuming that because this serves the whole state and transit does not, that we have to have or prioritize the other options. And then the final thing that I don't know that other council members are considering this as much, but I appreciated Councilmember Hayford O'Leary bringing up in the work session that the pure cost of this compared to how much funding is available, if we approve all three of these, we're actually putting them in direct competition with each other. There is not, even if you account for the fact that the railroad bridge would be added in twice, there's $260 million worth of projects here, and there's $250 million for the entire state. And so I also just, because particularly the Richfield proposal for everything we named is a much higher priority for me, I feel like putting them in direct competition is not helpful. So I will be voting no on this.
All right, additional comments? Councilmember Hayford O'Leary.
Just to add to the cost effectiveness point, it's not just the competition aspect, and I raised that question to Director Asher, and she had a very good point about sort of working collaboratively for these projects. But I do think the value we get relative to the money is really worth looking at, and that this is only one piece of this big vision. I think the first piece is twice this cost. This is more expensive than the Big 35 project. This is more expensive than the Crosstown Commons. This is a massive amount of public money going into this. Both, I don't know that that's the best use of public money, and also we know what happens when our Richfield Bloomington area demands this much from the state, is that it closes doors in the future. They want regional balance. We're spending all our chips on this. And this is going to increase traffic, it's going to increase emissions, and it's going to harm the residents who have the least power in Richfield, who are those who live along 494. I think I've said as much as I can say about it, but I do not think it helps Richfield. it concerns me to, again, stay so loyal to this 2017 plan. And I would ask whether literally to ask if either of the council members who've spoken in support of this want to respond or just to think about is how much would things have had to change since 2017 to change our mind on this? If traffic were 50,000 cars a day, if it were 10,000 cars a day, at some point we would say, okay, things have really changed. We need to reevaluate this. And I'm guessing we're not to that point, but I guess I would ask what's enough? Because for me, it's enough. I think this project was marginally justified in 2017, and it is not at all justified today.
I guess I can respond to that. I think this was initially proposed in 2017, but then, as Councilmember Troutman said, there were a lot of discussions about equity and a number of other things. And so we didn't give our approval, I think, until 2021 in the Policy Advisory Committee. So that's when then Mayor Regan Gonzalez and Councilmember Troutman were in part of that discussion for the equity needs and the fact that we need to put the pedestrian bridge across Chicago Avenue and some of the different concepts there. And so I think it wasn't fully developed and put forward till about 2021. So it's much more recent. So there has been change as it goes along. And I do think you have to think of it, as was mentioned earlier, as a system. And the earlier parts of the project were ones that benefited Richfield, but it's all part of a whole. And I think we need to look at the whole thing. It's not like, well, we got our part done, so then we're going to back out on the rest of the deal. I think it was put together as a complete package, but you can only do certain parts each time. And fortunately, the things that are benefiting Richfield are coming early in that package, but I do support that we need to support the whole package. Other comments? Councilmember Troutman?
Yeah, just to respond to that briefly, and sometimes my mind does, I'll confess, just it boggles at how complicated things like an interstate freeway system is. And I get a sense of that when I became a council member and I discovered how expensive and how complicated our local roads were. And I thought, it costs how much to build a block of road? This is, it's heartbreaking, but it's completely essential. And I am so impressed by our infrastructure when I think of how we process, so much of the of our rain runoff runs underneath 494 in ways that most Minnesotans are not cognizant of. And this is it took Councilmember Garcia, the better part of her career to deliver on a promise that was made to MnDOT. And so in a lot of ways, it's not just, is this the perfect project or is this the right project? But when we all reach consensus about, assuming we reach consensus, in 10, 15 years, I'm not confident that we'll have the resources that will be in the place to actually update the critical infrastructure. We just kind of take it for granted that that we're not constantly flooded. And so I think there is, there's at a base level value in maintaining infrastructure so it doesn't become poor and decrepit, and we come back and we have to say, well, now we think we've all reached a great idea that none of us can afford. I think we have a project that's much improved from when it came to us a number of years ago, and I think we're going to see infrastructure that is more equitable to Richfield, certainly than it was, and in as better shape than it was. And there are asks from our regional partners that I don't find at odds with Richfield's best interests. And I think there are also things we haven't really talked about because they're not necessarily germane to this. But 494, the Portland on-ramp, is one of the worst in the state in terms of safety and how short it is and how dense it is. And one of the things that this is going to do, I think, in all the visions we have, but it's really going to be improved, and that is going to be a benefit to our city as well. So I don't know if that addressed every one of your questions, but it's good faith. It was a good faith effort to address all of them.
It was good faith. It's more of a think about. Again, it's still like, what would be the line at which the vision should change? And again, I don't expect you to have a prepared answer.
Well, I'm sorry. we shouldn't have crosstalk, but you triggered. I wanted to answer all your questions directly. So.
Well, thank you.
I'd just say to that, and we've been in the same work sessions. That's usually a question that I ask every time, which is what does our data look? Well, how has it changed because of how people are responding differently to COVID and hybrid working? I know as an employer, we are operating differently than we did pre-pandemic in my other life, and I think that's really valid. And one of the pressures that we have is we have an obligation to make decisions with imperfect data. I would love to see better data. I've asked in every work session for better. Unfortunately, we won't have it, and so we have to make a decision whether or not to move now. And to answer your question, at what point? I think if we saw no congestion whatsoever, and we saw a trajectory that said it doesn't look like we're going to see any congestion, and our infrastructure is solid, and in 20 years we won't need to rely on the funding that we have right now to maintain the infrastructure at the level we need to make it. I think if that were the case, then I would be with you, but it's not, and so I'm on the other side. But I appreciate your insight and your cry for better data, which I agree we don't have.
Thank you.
All right, Councilmember Whalen.
Just one quick comment that acknowledging in where it seems this is likely to go, I don't think my vote is going to stop this from happening. And I guess I would hope that as the conversation continues, and I had discussed this with our staff, but just want to say to our regional partners, I think there are ways to move forward with this project that address my concerns, and would love to, as it moves forward, continue to talk about when we get the full greenhouse gas data, could we incorporate enough tree plantings either in the project or in adjacent cities that offset whatever greenhouse gas impacts it has? Could we, still negotiating actual, like leveraging this project for transit funding or transit specific projects. I'm sure there will be many more specifics that come up, but I hope that the concerns, even as the project is likely to move forward, that the concerns we're raising are heard and that we can work together on some collaborative solutions to that.
All right, are there any further comments or discussion?
I agree with everything Ben Whalen just said. I think that's a really good vision to keep at the forefront of our ongoing conversation.
All right, thank you. So at this point, we're going to call the question. All in favor of adopting the resolution, please say aye.
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 All opposed?
No.
All right, we've passed the resolution, 3 votes aye and 2 votes against. Thank you all for your time, and thank you for all the presenters and all the guests that have joined us this evening. All right, next item on our agenda, I'm going to turn it over to Councilmember Whalen. Go ahead.
Thank you, Mayor. This item is to consider the approval of agreements with nonprofit organizations to provide social services to the City of Richfield and authorize the city manager to execute agreements with those agencies. In November 2022, staff distributed a request for proposals for social services to nonprofits serving the City of Richfield in 2023. The 2023 city budget includes funding for organizations that provide services that benefit our community. The budget includes $75,500 for this purpose. A total of 8 proposals were received from Headway Emotional Health, Cornerstone Advocacy Services, the Family Partnership, Veep, Loaves and Fishes, Senior Community Services, Mira, and Trail. They provide a wide variety of services to Richfield residents. The total amount requested was $105,000, obviously exceeding the budgeted amount. And so I had the privilege, along with 2 Richfield residents and 2 staff members, to review the proposals and make the recommendations that are listed in the staff report. account for the type of service provided, the population served, and past performance. All 8 were recommended for funding. They're all groups that have requested funding in the past. And the recommendations, largely, if for folks looking at the full packet, you can see historical ones as well. We recommended modest increases for all of them. The other sort of parallel process that's worth naming and knowing about, the council approved some of our money from the American Rescue Plan dollars to provide similar support to community groups. And so the groups that we did not recommend an increase in funding for in this process, the 3 of them have also applied through the rescue plan process. And that will come up at a future date, but that was the reasoning for those that you see without an increase. The other thing I'll mention, that rescue plan money there's some for this year and then some for next year. After that, when we no longer have that, I think it is worth noting the needs in the community have only grown since the pandemic, and as whether it's literally the same people up here, but the council as a body is the one that controls how much funding we put toward this. Personally would hope that we could consider to continue increasing these funds to better match the needs of the community. But with that, I don't know if staff had anything more to add. We're just available for questions.
I would just add a thank you to all of our partners in the community who provide these services. There's some amazing organizations. Some are able to be with us tonight and others weren't able to be here, but all wanted to make sure you understood how much they appreciate the support financially and just support in general for what they're doing. Thank you.
Yes, and the ones named, for folks who aren't familiar, it's a mix of mental health and emotional health support, response to victims of domestic violence, offering food and housing support, transportation support, culturally appropriate services, a whole mix of things. And so, yes, it represents some great organizations working in Richfield. I would then make the motion to approve the agreements between the recommended nonprofit organizations and the City of Richfield, and authorize the city manager to execute agreements for services with those agencies.
Second.
Okay, it's been moved and seconded. Is there any discussion? I would like to very much thank all the community organizations that are providing these services, and thank you also for sitting through the whole meeting and bearing with us for all of this. We really, really appreciate all that you do for our community. I know I've served on the panel that Councilmember Whalen has in the past, and it's always amazing and heartwarming to read through the proposals and find out all the good work that you all are doing. So thank you from the bottom of my heart. Other comments or questions? All right, all in favor, please say aye.
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 All opposed? All right, we have approved the agreements. Thank you. Next, we'll move on to the city manager's report.
Thank you, Mayor. Nothing to report tonight.
All right, then we'll move on to claims and payroll.
I'll move claims and payroll.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded. Is there any discussion? All in favor of approving claims and payroll, please say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? All right, we've approved claims and payroll. Next, we'll move on to hats off to Hometown Hits.
Do we have
Councilman.
a city manager's report? Sorry to interrupt.
No, she said she had no report.
Okay, sorry.
All right. Councilmember Christensen, you get to start this time. Do you have anything you want to do for hats off?
Not necessarily in general, but from a personal point of view, I'd like to express my gratitude to my friends and neighbors and a lot of different people in the city that have supported me through this recent health issue that I've been through. It's been really nice just to kind of know that people have got your back, and, you know, and that's what Richfield's all about, from what I've determined, that, you know, a lot of people are out there that really do care about you, and they come to your need at the time when you have them. That's it.
All right. Councilmember Whalen.
Thank you. I just wanted to share. I know I'm a little late to the game, but my wife and I finally got to go to a Whitecaps game at the Richfield Ice Arena. Was totally a blast. Good to see others there. I was just confirming they do still have some of their season left for folks who haven't had a chance to go. But whether it's yet this year or in future seasons, would encourage folks to check them out. I know the team, the coaches are very excited to call Richfield home. And so we're excited to have them.
All right. Councilmember Hayford O'Leary.
I'm betting I'm stealing this from Councilmember Troutman, but I do certainly want to thank our staff for the excellent job plowing with the huge snowstorm and the great communication we had from the city about the parking rules during that time. I felt like it was just super clear. Everybody knew what to expect, and I was consistently impressed in the snow clearing I saw on my own block and alley as well. I also just wanted to mention that Mayor Supple and I had the pleasure of attending a League of Minnesota Cities event conference over the weekend. And it was really cool to be able to collaborate with people from other cities, mostly greater Minnesota. And just like even in very different communities and very different places, sort of the same challenges and successes in local government. So it was a really nice experience.
All right. Councilmember Troutman.
I'm good this week.
All right. Awesome. So I agree that I want to thank our plow crews and also our first responders that were with us during the storm. And I also want to thank all the neighbors that were helping neighbors. I saw it time and time again where people were helping, you know, if there was a big chunk of ice to break it up or to help shovel out the fire hydrants and all those types of things. So thank you to everybody that reached out and helped their neighbors. Last week was supposed to be the winter walk to school event, but that got canceled because there was no school because of the winter storm. So that's going to be happening tomorrow. So I look forward to seeing all the kids out walking to school tomorrow. And I want to thank Will Wislow for all the help that he's done to set that up. And then one other thank you is we have a number of people that love to send us photographs. And so I know we have some regular photographs that come in of the beauty at Wood Lake Nature Center, at Veterans Park. And I just want to thank those community photographers that are sharing that with all of us. Finally, staff has asked me to make a couple of announcements. We have a few open commission spots that are still left, and you can apply through March 17th, so you've got a month that you can apply. And there's 2 spots on the Advisory Board of Health that need to be filled, 2 spots for the Human Rights Commission, and 2 spots for the Richfield Tourism Board. And I'm going to give you more information on that, but again, all of those are open through March 17th. The Richfield Tourism and Promotion Board, called RTPB, consists of 7-member governance board that is funded by the city's lodging tax. The primary goals of RTPB are to support and increase the visibility of the city's hospitality industry, including lodging businesses, restaurants, attractions, events, and venues. RTPB meets monthly on the 3rd Thursday at 11 a.m., and the board consists of the following: 3 hotel representatives recruited and appointed by the RTPB, 1 chamber representative recruited and appointed by the Richfield Chamber of Commerce, 1 resident representative recruited and appointed by the City of Richfield, and 1 restaurant representative recruited and appointed by the City of Richfield. And that person must have restaurant experience, and preference is for a Richfield restaurant owner or manager, but they do not have to be a Richfield resident. And finally, the Richfield city manager or their designee should be a voting ex officio members. We're currently seeking the person who's the resident representative to fill a 2-year partial term, and the restaurant representative to fill a full 3-year term. So if you're interested in any of those, please let us know. And if you're interested in signing up for a commission, you can find that application by going onto the city website and looking under commissions and boards. So with that, thank you, everyone. We have no further business. We stand adjourned.